Good morning to all of you.
Good morning.
It has been really good to be here, and I feel like it's been a really rich weekend, and I'm sure you all have found that too. I feel like there are lots of things we can take home with us to ponder and to grow in. I brought with me today a white pitcher. One of my friends gave this to me, and I really like it a lot. This pitcher is beautiful. It is excellent. It has been crafted well. And let's imagine our lives like this white pitcher. God has made each one of us, and we are beautiful. But what are we allowing inside of our lives? Is it bitterness and envy? Maybe it's anger or selfishness? Or are we allowing God to fill us with Himself? Because whatever we allow or put inside of our lives will come out, just like this pitcher pours out whatever's inside. So something to keep in mind as we go throughout this topic. And as you all know, the topic title is Excellent in Spirit. And you may wonder, what does this mean? What does it look like to be excellent in spirit? How can I ever become excellent? Is it possible? And we want to take a deeper look at this, and I hope it can be a blessing to each one of you. I know it has been really good for me personally to look into this. First of all, let's look at a definition of excellence from a biblical view. And you'll find that on your handout. You can fill that in as we go. Excellent definition: being the best we can be with God's grace. Excellence refers to pursuing and doing the best we can with the gifts and abilities God gives, giving our best to the glory of God. I'll read that last one again. Excellence refers to pursuing and doing the best we can with the gifts and abilities God gives, giving our best to the glory of God. Excellence isn't just handed to us. We must pursue it and seek it. I believe God will give us the desires, and He'll put them within us, but we must cultivate them with His help. And now I would like to look at a single woman in the Bible who was excellent. I believe she was referred to a number of times this weekend, but I really like her story a lot. And if you want to, you can turn to Luke 21, verses 1 through 4. And we'll go ahead and read these verses again. Luke 21, verses 1 through 4. And he looked up and saw the rich men casting their gifts into the treasury. And he saw also a certain poor widow casting in thither 2 mites. And he said, Of a truth I say unto you, that this poor widow hath cast in more than they all. For all of these of their abundance cast in unto the offerings of God. But she of her penury hath cast in all the living she had. A widow gave her best by giving all she had. We see that life was not easy for her. She was poor. She did not have a lot of income, but she gave what she had. It wasn't like she was trying to compete with anybody or make herself look good. How was she going to provide for herself? Who was going to take care of her? But she gave what she had, what God had given to her, 2 tiny little mites. And God was glorified with that. And the thing I just love about this lady is that she gave her best. And think about that as we go through this topic. Give your best with what God has given to you. Colossians 3:23 says, "And whatsoever ye do, do it heartily as to the Lord, and not unto men." So how can we have an excellent spirit? What does it look like? And I have 4 points that we want to consider this morning. And you can turn to Daniel chapter 6. I'm going to look at the life of Daniel just a little bit. Daniel 6, we're going to read verses 1 through 11. It pleased Darius to set over the kingdom 120 princes, which should be over the whole kingdom, and over these 3 presidents, of whom Daniel was first, that the princes might give accounts unto them, and the king should have no damage. Then this Daniel was preferred above the presidents and princes, because an excellent spirit was in him, and the king thought to set him over the whole realm. Then the presidents and princes sought to find occasion against Daniel concerning the kingdom, but they could find none occasion nor fault, for as much as he was faithful, neither was there any error or fault found in him. Then said these men, "We shall not find any occasion against this Daniel, except we find it against him concerning the law of his God." Then these presidents and princes assembled together to the king and said thus unto him, "King Darius, live forever. All the presidents of the kingdom, the governors and the princes, the counselors and the captains have consulted together to establish a royal statute and to make a firm decree, that whosoever shall ask a petition of any god or man for 30 days, save of thee, O king, he shall be cast into the den of lions. Now, O king, establish the decree and sign the writing, that it be not changed, according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which altereth not." Wherefore King Darius signed the writing and the decree. Now when Daniel knew that the writing was signed, he went into his house, and his windows being open in his chamber toward Jerusalem, he kneeled upon his knees 3 times a day, and prayed, and gave thanks before his God, as he did aforetime. Then these men assembled, and found Daniel praying and making supplication before his God. And we'll skip down to verse 19, and this would be after Daniel spent the night in the lion's den. We'll read verses 19 to 23 yet. Then the king arose very early in the morning, and went in haste unto the den of lions. And when he came to the den, he cried with a lamentable voice unto Daniel. And the king spake and said to Daniel, O Daniel, servant of the living God, is thy God, whom thou servest continually, able to deliver thee from the lions? Then said Daniel unto the king, O king, live forever. My God has sent his angel, and has shut the lions' mouths, and they have not hurt me. For as much as before him innocency was found in me, and also before thee, O king, have I done no hurt. Then the king, exceedingly glad for him, and commanded that they should take Daniel up out of the den. So Daniel was taken up out of the den, and no manner of hurt was found upon him, because he believed in his God. And we'll stop reading there. So I want to think about Daniel's life just a little bit. He was taken from home. His name was changed. He had to speak a different language. And he was placed in an ungodly environment with idols. His diet was different. There was a lot of hard stuff happening in Daniel's life. And yet it says that he had an excellent spirit. And I think we as singles can relate a bit to Daniel's life. I'm sure he faced moments of loneliness in this strange place. I'm sure he had longings and desires and questions just like we do. Maybe he wondered, why am I here? What is my purpose? What place am I to fill? What is God doing? Is he in control? Does he care about me? I wish my circumstances were different. I don't know how Daniel felt, but it's just interesting to try to imagine. And yet, through all of this, I just love Daniel's attitude and his excellent spirit. We notice in chapter 6 of Daniel, verse 10, it says he kneeled upon his knees 3 times a day. And number 1 of key to excellence is prayer. Daniel inspires me how that prayer was important to him. And also his relationship with God was important. And I feel like these two are very connected. Prayer is our communication with God. Our prayer time and our time with God is so important. And I don't think we can be excellent in spirit without that relationship with God. Our relationship with God should be our first priority. And I know that it takes a lot of discipline and time and dedication to make this happen. But that's what's going to help us grow and thrive in God's kingdom. And sometimes we as singles, we can, in our loneliness and in our desire sometimes for marriage, we might try to fill that void with other things than God. But nothing will satisfy those longings but God. Take those longings to Him. James 4 verse 8 says, "Draw nigh to God, and He will draw nigh to you." Philippians 3 verse 10 says, "That I may know Him." And how does this happen? This happens by spending time with Him, communicating with Him. So maybe just a couple tips on spending time with God. Have a certain place and a time for your devotional time. Be consistent with it. Use variety in your devotions. I know that really helps me to not do it always the same way. Maybe study a certain character from the Bible, or something else I enjoy doing is picking out a word and looking up that word in the concordance and just reading different scriptures. And it's just interesting how that is all pulled together. Memorize scripture. Use a prayer journal. Maybe if you have a long commute to work, that would be a good time to pray, a good time to sing, and maybe listening to the Bible on CD. Just a couple of tips I thought of, and I'm sure you would have more to add. Now I want to think about a lady who was excellent in her relationship with God. You can turn to Luke chapter 10, verse 38. Luke 10:38 through 42. Now it came to pass as they went that he entered into a certain village, and a certain woman named Martha received him into her house. And she had a sister called Mary, which also sat at Jesus' feet and heard his word. But Martha was cumbered about much serving, and came to him and said, "Lord, dost thou not care that my sister hath left me to serve alone? Bid her therefore that she help me." And Jesus answered and said unto her, "Martha, Martha, thou art careful and troubled about many things, but one thing is needful, and Mary hath chosen that good part, which shall not be taken away from her." Mary showed an excellent spirit by sitting at the feet of Jesus. And I think I can identify with Martha. Martha was doing lots of good things, and she was serving, which is a beautiful thing, but perhaps her priorities were a bit mixed up. And are we too busy in our lives doing good things but missing out on what is most important? Our relationship with God, our prayer time with God, our communicating with God. We will always take time for what is most important to us. So where are our priorities? We can see that Mary found it important to sit at Jesus' feet and listen to him. All right, moving on to point 2. In verse 10 of Daniel chapter 6, at the end of the verse, we see that he gave thanks before his God. And this is possibly maybe one of my favorite points, because I just feel like it's such a needful part in our lives that so often gets missed. Being thankful is huge. And I know God has been working on me in this one. We as singles can have the temptation to become self-focused, and maybe it can be easy to sometimes have a pity party about ourselves. But I think thanking God takes our minds off of ourselves. And thankfulness and contentment go hand in hand. I think thankfulness produces contentment. And I've been really challenged by the quote, God is most glorified in us when we are most satisfied in him. That quote has challenged me often. Daniel gave thanks to God in a very difficult time in his life. I mean, he didn't know what was going to happen. And he purposed to do what was right anyway. And can we do the same? Can we thank God for the actual hard, dark times in our lives? It can be easy to give thanks in those times, but can we actually thank him for those actual hard things? Can we thank him for our gift that he has given to us of singlehood? Thank you, God, that in my loneliness, it draws me to you. Thank you, God, that when my dreams are shattered, you have better plans for me. Are we going to allow our circumstances to make us bitter or thankful people? 1 Thessalonians 5:18 says, in everything give thanks. And it's a command. God has commanded us to do that. All right, let's turn to Luke 2. I would like to look at a woman who was excellent in being thankful. Luke 2, verse 36 through 38. And there was one Anna, a prophetess, the daughter of Phanuel of the tribe of Aser. She was of great age, and she had lived with an husband 7 years from her virginity. And she was a widow of about 84 years, which she parted not from the temple, but served God with fastings and prayers night and day. And she coming in that instant gave thanks likewise unto the Lord, and spake of him to all them that look for redemption in Jerusalem. And the background to this passage would be when Mary and Joseph brought Jesus to the temple. Anna showed an excellent spirit by giving thanks unto the Lord. And this is another lady that challenges me. She also had hard things in her life. She had been married, and then her husband passed away. But she didn't let that stop her. She committed herself to working in the temple, praying and fasting night and day. And she was privileged to be able to see the coming of the Messiah, our Redeemer, and what an honor that would have been. And she responded to that by giving thanks. Are we thankful for what God has done for us? in our lives, or are we too busy looking for what we wish we could change? I'm sure there were some things in her life that she wished she could change. But it says that she spake of him to all them that looked for redemption in Jerusalem. I love how that she didn't keep that news to herself. And maybe a couple tips on giving thanks. One thing I'm doing right now is I have a thank you journal. And I'm really enjoying that. It helps me to think about what God is doing for me in the little and the big things. And it can be anything from maybe your friend wants to take you out to eat, or maybe you hear a Bob White sing, or maybe a child gives you a hug at just the right moment. Or it could be God's reassuring peace in a very tough time. And I enjoy looking back on those and just seeing how God has been so faithful, because we tend to forget. Another thing that we've done recently in our family is we have this little grease board in our kitchen, and we would write down a couple letters of the alphabet at a time, and then in passing any of us could just write down different attributes of God that started with that letter. And that was just really good for all of us to just think about who God is to us. And it just reminds us that He is faithful, and it reminds us to give thanks to Him for what He has done. All right, point number 3. Faithful in serving. Verse 4 of chapter 6 in Daniel, we see that Daniel was faithful. It says there was no error found in him. And wow, that really impressed me. I'm sure that's all of our desire, that could be said of us. Daniel was faithful to God, but he was also faithful in his work. Daniel was given different talents and different gifts from God. He had wisdom to interpret dreams, and he was given a high position in the kingdom, and he was faithful in that. And we each have been given a gift. And what are we doing with that gift? Our singlehood is a gift. Will we use it as God intended to faithfully serve? Or are we going to waste it? We have many opportunities as singles to serve. Maybe God calls us to the mission field, or maybe it's simply teaching school, or it could be work in the medical field, helping young moms, or just simply being an encouragement to those around us. And the list could go on. Daniel could have decided that, I really don't want to be here in Babylon. I wish I would be somewhere else. I've been taken away from my home, and I just really don't want to help these people. Maybe he had dreams and desires of doing something else. But God had put him there for a reason. And he embraced that call on his life and served God faithfully where he was at. And here's another quote that I really like. Let go of the gift desired and receive the gift given. Sometimes we would maybe choose a different path than God has given us. But I think it's so beautiful when we can just accept and embrace the gift that God has given to us and use it to serve Him faithfully. Let's turn to Acts chapter 9 for an example of a woman who served faithfully. Acts Acts 9, verses 36 through 40. Now there was at Joppa a certain disciple named Tabitha, which by interpretation is called Dorcas. This woman was full of good works and alms deeds which she did. And it came to pass in those days that she was sick and died, whom when they had washed, they laid her in an upper chamber. And forasmuch as Lydda was nigh to Joppa, and the disciples had heard that Peter was there, they sent unto him 2 men, desiring him that he would not delay to come to them. Then Peter arose and went with them. When he was come, they brought him into the upper chamber, and all the widows stood by him weeping, and showing the coats and garments which Dorcas made, while she was with them. But Peter put them all forth, and kneeled down and prayed, and turning him to the body said, Tabitha, arise. And she opened her eyes, and when she saw Peter, she sat up. Dorcas showed an excellent spirit by faithful service through her gift of sewing. God had given that gift to her, and obviously we can see she made quite an impression on the widows' lives, because they were really sad when she passed away. In verse 36, we notice that she was full of good works and alms deeds, which she did. And I think that a single lady that serves, her life is so beautiful. It brings the focus off of ourselves and brings glory to God. And it also gives us a sense of purpose in life. God has given each of us something to do. It might be small, and sometimes it might be serving in the background. But do it faithfully, because God sees, and that's really what matters. 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 10 in the NIV says, each one should use whatever gift he has received to serve others, faithfully administering God's grace in its various forms. Point number 4, I'm going to take from Daniel chapter 6, verse 23. It says, so Daniel was taken up out of the den, and no manner of hurt was found upon him, because he believed in his God. So Daniel believed or trusted in his God. Daniel trusted in God even when he was thrown into the scary lion's den. And I just can't imagine how he must have felt, but I'm amazed at his simple trust. It says no matter of hurt was found upon him, because he believed in his God. He knew that God could be fully trusted. Proverbs 3, verses 5 through 6 says, trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not unto thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths. When we trust in God, we are letting God be in control. We accept what he brings into our lives. And acceptance is beautiful. It's a life at rest and at peace with God in our circumstances. I want to think about a lady who trusted God. I believe she was mentioned earlier this weekend. You can find her in Matthew 9, Matthew 9, verse 20 through 22. And behold, a woman which was diseased with an issue of blood 12 years came behind him and touched the hem of his garment. For she said within herself, if I may but touch his garment, I shall be whole. But Jesus turned him about, and when he saw her, he said, daughter, be of good comfort. Thy faith hath made thee whole. And the woman was made whole from that hour. The woman who touched Jesus' garment showed excellence in spirit by complete trust in Jesus. She knew that if she could just touch his garment, she would be whole. And I love her complete trust. This lady had exhausted her resources. She had gone to all kinds of doctors and paid lots of money, and yet she couldn't find a cure. And by that point in her life, if it would have been me, I would have been pretty discouraged and depressed about life. But she had this full confidence and trust in Jesus that if she could just get near enough to him, she could just touch his garment and she would be whole. What about for us? We have the Bible with lots of promises. And can we just simply take God at his word and trust him? And I believe that surrender leads to trust. When we surrender our lives, we aren't trying to be in control of them. We are leaving our lives in God's hands and letting go. Can we surrender our future, our singlehood, our life to God? Can we trust that God is good and he will take care of us? Or are we trying to take things into our own hands and trying to help God? Jeremiah chapter 29 verse 11 in the NIV says, I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future. And I just love that verse. It just really says it well and means a lot. God has good plans for us, and let's trust him with those plans. All right, now we are going to move on to the last part of the topic. We want to discuss how an excellent spirit is portrayed in different personalities, and then also how to relate to different groups of people with excellence. So first of all, the different personalities. How does that look? How is an excellent spirit portrayed? First of all, I think we need to accept who God made us to be. We are all different, and that's okay. God needs all of his people for different aspects of his work. And realize, too, that being excellent may look different for different personalities. Be who God made you to be, and don't try to be someone else. It can be easy to look at somebody else and feel like they're doing an amazing job for God, and you just simply wish you could be like them. But comparing ourselves to others will not make us excellent, and it will take our peace and joy away. Sometimes we as women use our personalities to make excuses like, I can't do that because I'm not gifted in that. And yes, that might be true in some cases, but sometimes God calls us to do something that we feel like we aren't capable of. And I think so many times we find it, that's where his grace comes in. And we can be excellent in that calling because we are relying on God's strength and not our own. Or maybe another excuse might be, I know I can tend to be domineering and controlling in a situation, but you'll just have to excuse me because that's the way God made me. Or you can put any type of personality in there and make an excuse of some kind. Yes, God gave us each a personality, and we can't change that, but we can change our actions to be who Christ made us to be. Now, how can we relate to different groups of people with excellence? First of all, relating to children. I don't know if maybe you as a young girl remember maybe an auntie or a young lady in church that paid a lot of attention to you. and how that meant a lot to you. And possibly or probably that lady was a single lady. Married people often are busy with their own children, and we have the unique privilege of being able to spend more time with maybe our nieces and nephews or the little people from church. And we need them just like they need us. Notice them, say their name. They love that. I was recently reminded how that they are watching our lives and that we need to be careful what we say and the attitudes that we show. I was with my nieces and nephews, and I was talking and saying some different things, and suddenly I realized that my little niece is copying what I say. And suddenly it didn't quite sound so good coming from her little mouth. And it was a good reminder to me to be careful what I say. Be willing to teach Sunday school or teach school if God calls you to that. I feel like we can be a godly influence to the next generation. And maybe sometimes it feels like, well, I've taught a lot of Sunday school already, and I would like to be in the adult class. But think about it as an opportunity to bless these little people and show them Jesus. Other things that we can do are babysitting for parents. I know that can really be a blessing to their parents as well as to us. And I've been inspired to notice the young teenage girls. They need us. They are going through a challenging time in life, as we well remembered how it is to be a teen. Listen to them and hear their stories and simply be their friend. And we also can speak truth into their lives and encourage them to be faithful to God. And then maybe a word of caution. Don't make the children that you're around distrust their parents by what you say or do. Maybe you don't agree with what their parents are doing or saying, but we don't want the children to disrespect their parents. So be careful with that. How do we relate to other women? And I know for myself and lots of other people, it's easy for us to box people and kind of put them in different groups. I mean, here's the grandmas, and here's the young marrieds, and there's the youth, and I'm not sure really where I am. And maybe we feel like a misfit. And we want someone we can relate with and someone we can share with. And I don't know what your situation is like. Maybe you don't have a lot of single ladies where you live. But I think that we tend to put people in boxes too much. Yes, it does feel good to have someone that you can relate with and that is in our stage of life. And I think it's valuable and helpful and important to have relationships and friendships with other single ladies. But what I'm trying to remember for myself is that we all have something in common if we are serving God. And so maybe we need to just make the first move to contact other people. We really do need other people in our lives. They can add so much input, and we need each other to stay faithful. And are we thinking only about ourselves and wanting people to notice us? Or are we going to be the first to reach out? I know that's a challenge to me. So my encouragement to all of you is just to be friends with ladies of all ages and stages in life. We need each other so much. All right, how do we relate with men? It would be interesting to have your input on this one too. I feel like we all need men in our lives. Those of us that have fathers or brothers that we can go to for advice are so blessed. I know I have my father that I can go to, but I know not everybody has that. And so maybe you feel like you need advice from a man. Who do you go to? Find a trusted man that you feel good about, that you feel like is following God and has wise advice. But I think it's important that, if at all possible, to have another lady with you. Maybe it's his wife, or maybe it's your friend. Because we want to remember that, we aren't married to him. He's somebody else's wife. And I know for us women, especially, it's amazing how our emotions can quickly go to places that we hadn't intended and where we don't want them to go. And we need to keep our boundaries where they belong. I know we as singles need to work with men sometimes, and that can be okay and fine. But be careful. You will never regret that you are careful. Pray that God will keep your heart and emotions where they need to be. But along with that, we need to do our part too. We need to guard our heart and check our motives. Proverbs 4, verse 23 says, "Keep thy heart with all diligence, for out of it are the issues of life." How do we relate to our authorities? We need to be independent, right? We need to take care of ourselves and make a lot of our own decisions. But I think it's good for us to be dependent on somebody. I don't think that we should become so independent that the authorities in our lives suddenly just don't matter anymore, and that we don't want advice from other people. We need input from others. And also, we don't want to step ahead of the men in authority in our lives. Maybe it's your boss, or maybe it's your minister. Men do not appreciate when their authority is trampled on. And it really is not beautiful either when a woman is domineering. 1 Peter 3, verse 4, "But let it be the hidden man of the heart, and that which is not corruptible, even the ornament of a meek and quiet spirit, which is in the sight of God of great price." So, what do I have in my picture today? What is it filled with? Is it excellent things like prayer and thankfulness and faithful service to God and trust? Are we allowing God to fill us with himself? What is being poured out of my life each day? But we have this treasure in earthen vessels, that the excellency of the power may be of God and not of us. And I would like to close with a verse from Philippians 1:10. "That ye may approve things that are excellent, that ye may be sincere and without offense till the day of Christ." May God bless you all.